The question today is, if you pay more for one of these diesel heaters, do you actually get more? And is it worth the extra money? Let's find out. Right out of the gate, what I can tell you is, yeah, you do get more. Everything about this heater is better than the 30 kilowatt steel version I had purchased. This appears to be a Chinese clone of a Webasto Thermo Pro 90. Now, for those of you that watched my video last week about testing the 30 kilowatt Chinese diesel heater, those cost about $300. For full transparency, this one is twice the price. The sheer amount of accessories that you get with this far exceeds what you get on the other. You get an actual OLED controller, which is really cool, and I'm curious to test that out. The pump has a brushless motor. The motor inside this is brushless. It appears to be very well made, and the seller was extremely communicative. I have a link in the description for where I purchased this off AliExpress. They sent me manuals, they answered questions. This was here in 3 days from China. Now, shipping was not cheap, and shipping is part of the costing twice as much as the other. That's including shipping, so twice as much to get this here. I am really interested to test this and see how it behaves, how efficient it is, how quiet it is, and see if it's really worth it. Because on the surface, I feel like it is worth it. But if it's just as inefficient as the steel ones, you know, running 33% efficient, that's not going to work. So it's already on the bench. I've got some basic connections, but let's get a bucket of water up here and let's run a test and see. We have 794 grams of fuel. We have a 5-gallon bucket of water. I'm using a battery charger as a power supply because I'm hoping that it will provide enough power to run this. I do have the intake and exhaust connected, and the exhaust is running through a muffler. This is the controller. Let's fire it up and see what happens. So one click. This has power levels, like 1 through 6. So let's put it at 6. Let's test max power. You can set your water temp. Right now it's set to 85. You can set a duration time, like I guess if you want to run for a specific length. You can set a timer. Settings, you can set the time. There's a Bluetooth option. I don't think there's an app, but I'll have to look into that. Sound, information about the heater, air pressure, runtime, temperature scale, and English. So let's go. I think I just hold it down. It's on. Green indicator light. I can hear the pump start running. And that's one thing about this unit that I think is going to set it apart, is the fact that since the pump is brushless and the motor in here is brushless, it can ramp up and down as needed by the load. This pump is running and it's so quiet I can't hear it, and I can barely feel it moving water, but I can see the water swirling in the bucket. So it's running, but it's just very, very quiet. This is also nice and quiet. The fuel pump just started ticking, and it's a lot quieter than other fuel pumps that I've had. If you did hard mount this to like a frame rail, I bet you could hear it though. It does come with a soft mount to isolate the sound. The heater has started. I can feel it starting to put out heat, so I've activated the timer. So the run has begun. Just gradually warming up. I can barely feel the output here, and it's very quiet. It's surprisingly quiet. I hope it ramps up and gives me more than what it's giving me now. Here we go. Now it's finally starting to ramp up and build some heat. 13.3 degrees Celsius. It's still cold. The output's about 20 degrees Celsius. Still pretty cold. Just barely warm to the touch. Here we go. Now it's ramping up. Because this took like 3 minutes to spool up and actually start outputting max, what I would call max capacity, I took another reading of temperature and fuel and started a second timer to get a real sense of what the output is at max. So like when it's really revved up and going, what's the output? So we'll see a total and then sort of peak just to get an idea. So once it shuts off, I'll stop both timers and we'll get a good sense of what this thing outputs. What's nice is it also has a little temperature indicator. It gives you a rough idea of what the current temperature of the fluid is, and it appears to be fairly accurate. We're shooting for 85 degrees C. 27.7 on the body. 30 on the exhaust. 77 degrees Celsius down here. And the exhaust pipe's 126. .36 degrees Celsius. On my initial inspection, if this thing had a negative, I would say it's this right here. This is a sort of a composite fitting. I don't like the fact that you could easily knock this off and break it. I believe this fitting is here so it can be removed and you can mount the pump under here. Either way, not a fan of this. I wish it was aluminum. Maybe there's a way to upgrade it. We'll see. So you have to, when you mount it, you have to take into consideration, do not load this fitting up. What's crazy is the smell. The exhaust smell of this heater is totally different from the other one. They're both using the exact same diesel. I don't know if this is a cleaner combustion. I really don't know, but it smells very different now. I have the garage doors open for ventilation, but it's odd how this is burning very different. Okay, we just got to 79 degrees Celsius and it's starting to ramp down. It's starting to slow down. We're not quite at 85, but it's entering how it's tapering off as we get to 85. Yeah, the power's pretty much ramped down. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the test. 77.9, so 78. 583. This is very interesting. As we approached the end point for the test, it started to ramp down and just idle. So to be honest, I really don't want to count this idling. I want to count what its maximum output is because I want to know what kind of kilowatt rating we're getting out of this at maximum, and I want to know its efficiency. So to do that, I took a time slice out of the heating of this water. From the moment it started to really spool up to maximum output, I started a timer, took another measurement of temperatures and weights, and then when it started to ramp down and idle, I stopped that test, took another round of measurements. We started at 16.3 degrees Celsius. We ended it at 74 degrees Celsius. That took 11 minutes and 6 seconds, and it used 163.6 grams of fuel. When you plug those numbers in, with doing zero modifications, this thing is 62.9% efficient, or 63% efficient out of the box. That is super exciting. And the kilowatt output is 6.86 kilowatts. It's rated for 9. We're getting 6.86, almost 7. That's not bad. For reference, the entire test with the ramp up and the ramp down, just to give you an idea of what that is, that's an efficiency rating of 60.2%, and a kilowatt output of 6.46. That's taking into account the ramp up and the ramp down. The most we ever got out of this behemoth, which is, I'm going to argue, 3 times the size, the most we ever got out of this was 33%. This is already twice as efficient. If you didn't see my previous video, we modified that behemoth to get it up to, I think, 50% efficiency with a heat exchanger and modifications, and we used an air-to-water intercooler. So this is already kicking that thing's butt out of the box. And after modifying the big 30 kilowatt heater, the max output we got was 53% efficiency and 11.4 kilowatts. So yes, the total amount of kilowatts you get out of the big behemoth is more than this, but it's far less efficient. I think I can live with this as this is. If we're talking about money spent, it's now maintaining this temperature by just ticking away very slowly, sipping diesel and keeping the water flowing. I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. Now, I want to hook my intercooler up to this and see if I can wring out some more efficiency. Let's take it apart and see what the inside looks like. That will be interesting. When I speak about the quality of this unit, it's apparent in every part of it. From the connectors, which have O-rings and are watertight, both male and female, to the way the wiring harness is wrapped. It's just a job well done, really. The unit itself is rather small. This cap flips up and gives you access to the wires. You need to take these two loose in order to take the heat exchanger off. Kind of reminds me of the sandworm off of Dune. But there's a lot more fins, and the fins are a lot thicker than on the steel version. Overall, it's a very well-made unit. Like I stated earlier, this is my only concern. This polycarbonate, you have to be careful with that, especially you can't let it freeze. These welds are super nice. Alright, so there's your igniter. There's your fuel line. Potentially a fan or a sensor. Probably a sensor. There's a tab under here that you lift up, and it looks like the entire computer just pulls away. But these are the main constituent parts. Fan unit. There is your combustion unit. And you have your heat exchanger. Okay, let me show you my abomination. And I know you're probably screaming at your screens right now going, oh my god, more aluminized tape. This is so janky. And you're right. This is completely janky. But before I commit to fabricating a adapter out of aluminum and taking the finish off this and welding all of this in to make it a fit, I want to test the concept first. So yeah, this is going to work for our test, just to direct the exhaust into the air to water heat exchanger or intercooler, and yeah, it just vents into the shop. From previous testing, I know that by the time the exhaust gets down to here, it'll be cool enough to not burn my sandbag there. We have the same 5 gallons of water, this time on the floor, so there is a little bit more head pressure than before, but I don't think it will matter. I'm going to do the same testing protocol as before. I'll turn the system on, I will let it ramp up, and when it hits full running capacity, I'll take measurements, start the clock, and then when it starts to ramp down, when it reaches its set temperature, I will take measurements again. And we will see if the output of this heater is enough to actually work with this. This is a large intercooler. I think the bigger 30 kilowatt units lend themselves better to this, but we're going to find out. We're on max power. There we go, we're on. I just heard the pump kick into high gear. Still ramping up. Clock started. Ramp down now. I'm not sure about the results, to be honest with you. Time to do some math. I'm not gonna lie, I had my suspicions, but I did not expect this result. Okay, the slice of time that I measured when the heater had ramped up and fully was hot and rolling. So the start temperature was 14 degrees Celsius. It raised the water to 74.4 degrees Celsius in a time period of 12 minutes and 3 seconds. Then it consumed 174.6 grams of fuel to do that. That is an efficiency rating of 62.0% and a kilowatt rating of 6.64. Now that's with the air-to-water intercooler. For reference, the previous test with nothing, just the diesel heater by itself, came out to be 62.9% efficient and 6.68 kilowatts. So the air-to-water intercooler actually slowed us down and lost efficiency. And here is why I think that is so. This air-to-water intercooler is large. I purchased it with these really big diesel heaters in mind, ones with a 2 3/4 inch output, lots of air moving. So it takes probably half the run for this little heater to even begin to heat up that intercooler. And until it is up to temperature, it's a heat soak. It's pulling heat out of the fluid being pumped through it. So it looks like this heater can't heat the intercooler up fast enough to make a difference, and so therefore it slows it down. I guess I could do a test once everything's up to temperature, but I really feel like they're not matched. I think the intercooler's too big for this heater. And, you know, it's a copy of Webasto's design. So the Germans, or Austrians, the Germans, more than likely probably wrung every little bit of efficiency they could out of this system in their design, leaving minimal to no real heat waste. There is some heat waste, but I don't know if it's worth the squeeze to try to capture that last, 30% or 28%, because we were at 62.9, 63%. Is it worth to capture the last 27%? I don't know. Interesting, nonetheless. So room for improvement with the big guys. Sort of little room to improvement with this guy, at least with what I have now. So we tried the air-to-water intercooler, and I had honestly forgotten that I had bought this. I bought this used off eBay. This is an exhaust gas recirculation cooler off of a car. I'm not sure what car it's off of, but it's a lot smaller than the air-to-water intercooler, and I think it's a better fit for this application. Now, I have to modify it, so I need to weld a 1.5-inch pipe on this end and this end, and then do something with the plumbing. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to modify this and use it to test the 9 kilowatt heater and see if this works better than the much larger air to water intercooler. Yeah. Same test as before, same parameters as before, except now I have the exhaust gas cooler mounted below the heater. Water in, water out. With this one being smaller, we'll see if it's sized more appropriately. So once it's done priming and it actually ramps up and starts producing some heat, I will start the timer and weigh the fuel. Water's 10.8 degrees C. Start. 57. Timer started. 12.5 degrees Celsius on the water, 757 grams of fuel. And here we go. Let's see how it does. Keep the test the same. I'll install the intake pipe. I don't think it does much, but you know, the other test had that. Let's install it. We're 4 minutes in. Water is 30 degrees Celsius. At 4 minutes. Just like the other test with the cooler, we're experiencing a lot of steam out the exhaust. Just took the exhaust pipe off. There's a lot of black condensation liquid coming out of the exhaust gas cooler. I don't know if it has a leak. Could possibly have a leak. It is used. That would be lovely if they sold me a damaged exhaust gas cooler. I stopped the test at 11 minutes exactly because the heater was starting to ramp down and I wanted to see what its peak output was. So in 11 minutes we heated 5 gallons of water from 12.5 degrees Celsius to 74 degrees Celsius, and we used 157 grams of fuel. That gave us an efficiency of 69.3%, almost 70%, and a rated kilowatt output of 7.39 kilowatts. Rated for 9, we're getting 7.39 out of it. That's respectable. The only negative about this test is the apparent leak in my exhaust gas cooler, my used one from eBay. I mean, it wasn't terribly expensive, but I assumed it was working. I wanted to verify that it wasn't the actual heater itself leaking, but the actual exhaust gas cooler, and that appears to be the case. There's no moisture on the exhaust of the heater itself. It's got to be the EGR. In an effort to get down to the bottom of this exhaust gas cooler, I have washed it out and restarted the test. Timer's running. Let's see what comes out of this thing now. At this flow rate, it looks like a leak to me, versus condensation. You know, because the exhaust is warm, hot, moist air, and this is cooling it down to the dew point or the condensation point. We'll see. I'm watching it. Okay. Just wrapped up second test, and the exhaust gas cooler definitely has a leak. It's garbage. And the results were very much the same. The efficiency on that run was 69.7%, so basically 70% efficiency. That's good. Power output was 7.19 kilowatts, a little less. BTUs per hour, 24,533. So while we are gaining some efficiency, with the exhaust gas cooler, I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze due to added complexity, plumbing, and so forth. Yeah, we'll see. Okay. I think it's time to wrap this up and land this plane. I think in the last couple weeks I've done 15 different test runs on these two heaters, and while they're very different, the questions I had for myself was the larger steel body 30 kilowatt heater seemed like the right fit for the Flying Pig hydronic heat system, but in reality this smaller 9 kilowatt aluminum body version ended up being the victor, and I'll explain why. The differences between these two, despite the size difference, is mainly efficiency. If you round all of the test results, this one is about 30 to 33% efficient, and this one is about 60% efficient, meaning it's about twice as efficient. It's also twice the price. This one's about $300, this one's about $700. The question is it worth it? And the short answer is yes. All of the advanced features you get with this unit, the controller, the efficiency, the fact that it ramps up and maintains temperature, the build quality far exceeds this one. This is a much, much nicer product. But then the thought comes, how long would I have to run this heater to return my investment? What's the ROI? What's the difference? Because I could afford the cheap heater, but how much is it going to cost me in the long run? To answer that question, I had to make a couple of assumptions, okay? First of all, even though this is 30 kilowatt, if you actually look back at the test from the first video, I'll put a link up above, it only outputted right around 7 kilowatts. And this one, while it's rated for 9, also put out in the neighborhood of 7 kilowatts. And now that number is important because the bus is roughly 320 square feet of what I would classify as poorly insulated space because it is a vehicle. Most online guides indicate that in order to heat with radiant floor heating a space like that, you need about 60 BTU per square foot. That roughly equates to 7 kilowatts. I need about 24,000 BTU roughly to do this bus comfortably, which is about 7 kilowatts of output. So that's what I based these calculations on. Also, I don't know where you live, and I'm not 100% sure where this bus is going to end up living, so the winter I had to sort of guesstimate. So I did 3 months. So the equation sets up 3 months out of the year we're going to run these diesel heaters. They're not going to run all day. I figured 12 hours of run time a day was enough to get us through the cold nights and to sort of idle throughout the day. So I calculated 90 days, 12 hours a day. Also, I factored in the average price of diesel as of today. The filming of this video was $3.63.5 a gallon. This heater will cost you $2,099.93 to heat this bus for 90 days, running 12 hours a day with its consumption, producing about 7 kilowatts of output. On the other hand, if you run this heater, this will cost you $1,011.76. The difference is about $1,000, $1,080 roughly, is the difference between these two. Now that's one season. Now while it's a fictitious winter, your winters may be far milder or far harsher, this heater will more than pay for itself in efficiency in one season. Now the question is diesel a really valid form of heating for a vehicle like this versus, say, propane? In my opinion, yes. Diesel contains more BTU per gallon than propane. It's more energy dense. Plus, the bus already has a 100-gallon diesel tank on it that I plan to tap to run this heater. So I don't want to invest in a separate propane system plus a tank, plus I have to now find a place to fill it when I can just swing the bus into any truck stop, fill up my main diesel tank, and know that I have enough diesel to run this heater for quite a long time. So I feel like it is a very valid way to heat. And if you're in an off-grid situation and you can get your hands on diesel, if you had a 100-gallon or 200-gallon tank, you could run one of these heaters for quite a long time off that. So for my money, it's the smaller, more efficient heater. Now, while I can't see spending $3,000 for a brand name Webasto or an Eberspacher, I think a Chinese clone built to this quality, and I've got a link in the description for this heater, is well worth the money and well worth the time. I really hope this 3-video tour of these heaters helped you. If you are in the same boat as I am, trying to build a hydronic heat system for your vehicle or your cabin or something like that, and you're looking for a way to generate heat from diesel, I hope this helped. Yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. And if you would have done things different, or if I messed something up, let me know. Yeah, I've rounded over a lot of these figures because there's a lot of math involved in this, so I just sort of like rounded them out just to give us a rough idea of what it would cost us to operate. But yeah, I'm Jason. Thank you for watching and hanging out with me. I'll see you in the next one.